So we're back. One of the things that we've learned when we've been working with business owners is as we go through that, particularly that 30 days pre to 90 days post transition piece, and they really get into the weeds and start learning about all the aspects of the business. They come back to us and they say, "Wow, we really love working with you guys. We've learned so much. You guys have really lifted us up in the way we've transitioned in this business. We want to keep working with you. So how can we do that?" And there's a couple of different areas we work in. One of them is continuing to work with them on the financial side of the business, and that can involve what we call consulting CFO services. That's a job that both Brittany and I have had in the past, and we also, can do things that are a little bit more tactical in that regard, with offering the controller that's on our team some of the detailed accounting work and things like that. So, Brittany, why don't you tell us about our CFO and controller and other services that are ongoing services past that 90-day transition?
Sure. So, like we talked about earlier, the transition period is a really intensive period. So, from the financial side of things, usually that first, just to backtrack a little bit to explain the differences in the cadence of how that looks, that relationship, that working relationship looks during the transition period. That first week, from a transition side of things on the financials, we're meeting with you probably 2 or 3 times that first week. And then after that, it can be like weekly, biweekly, like we discussed for the remaining 12 weeks. Once we get out of that critical period and everything's settled and things are moving smoothly, people are getting them trained on new softwares and making sure that everything's moving smoothly, we transition to more of a monthly, or in some cases quarterly cadence, but generally speaking, a monthly cadence. And we start looking at things, like you said, like the long-term planning, looking at, okay, we've set up some initial goals, some initial metrics. How are you tracking against what you have done? How are you tracking against where you want to be? Let's look at your different benchmarks against where you were as a company prior to this, or, the old owners or whatever, looking at industry data to see how are we tracking here, and, just different strategies for perhaps optimizing revenue, or, strategies for making sure that your cost of goods sold and your OpEx and all those things are where they should be, that your cash reserves are growing and building, that you're building a good cash cushion. We have, like you said, different ratios and metrics for monitoring that. And they do vary a little bit by industry, which is another thing that people want to keep in mind. There are some that apply, universally across businesses, say like gross margin or something like that. But in the example of a dentist, you might want to look at something like, what is the chair utilization rate? And we help you set up those metrics and design those metrics and track them, make sure you're improving in the way that you want to. On the more technical side of things, like you said, CFO work is really a lot more about strategy and analyzing the numbers and what the numbers tell you, basically helping you interpret the stories the numbers are giving you about your business. Controllership work and bookkeeping work is making sure that transactional data is good and valid, because I think a really important thing for people to remember, and why this is so critical to have a good, solid accounting team, whether it's in-house or outsourced or whatever the case may be, if you don't have good numbers, all the advice that we're preparing for you isn't going to be worth much. Garbage in, garbage out.
Mhm.
So that's where the controllership and bookkeeping come in, as far as they're looking a little bit more at the technical things, making sure the banks are reconciled, making sure that the accounts are up to date, making sure the numbers are what they should be, so that we can be sure that we're basing our metrics and our advice to you on solid data.
Yeah. Now, folks that may be viewing these videos, they may be trying to buy a business,
Mhm.
and that all fits with what we're talking about. But they may also already have a business. They may be going, "Wow, I need some of that advice in my existing business," and it has nothing to do
Sure.
specifically with an acquisition. So, can we do that for a business owner that just has a business and is looking for that kind of strategic financial advice? Can we offer CFO services in that case as
Absolutely.
well?
Absolutely. And there is a lot of value in that. And in fact, most people, or not most, but many small business owners that I've spoken with that are looking for that type of services, are like, their financials are just something they do for taxes. All they know is they don't like going to their accountant, because every year it just, here's the number, and my accountant gives me you know, this giant tax bill, and I don't know what it's saying or what it's going, or I don't even know if I'm doing good. Is this good? Is this bad? Where am I in my industry? Where am I in my area? A lot of small business owners don't really know that. I mean, you might have, say, a contractor come up to you and say, well, my gross margin is 35%. Is that bad or good? You know? And it might depend on his region. It's going to, or my competitors charging, job costing is another thing that you look at, setting up templates and things for that. So you might have someone say to you, well, my competitor's charging $10,000. I'm going to charge $10,000. I say, well, what does it cost you to produce that? Well, I don't know, but that's what he's charging. I say, what if it happens that it costs you $11,000 to produce that result? Well, that would be terrible. But do you know what your costs are? No. So then that's where we would dive in and look at those things and say, how much are you actually making? What does your margin really look like? What do your labor costs really look like? What do your material costs really look like? So that we can give you some actionable data. And maybe it turns out that it actually costs him $5,000 to produce. The market bears $10,000. Great. He has a 50% margin. That's awesome. So, but that's the kind of data you need, because I see that far too often in small businesses where folks just charge what the competition is charging with no regard to whether they can deliver the service for the same price or not. So I definitely think it's a good thing.
Great. Great. Well, that anything else you can think of just as a final wrap up point in terms of the CFO service, whether it be for the transitioning or acquirer of businesses or the ongoing piece? What if there was like one thing you could tell business owners about having a CFO as a small business? What would it be?
I think you could think of us like your lighthouse, right? We're going to help guide you through the storms. We're going to help see problems before you hit the rocks, and help you prepare. If you are looking to exit, we can help you make sure that's ready. If you need additional capital or financing, we can help connect you with those relationships, manage those relationships, do the modeling to see if it works for what you're doing.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Brittany. We appreciate you sharing that with our viewers.